So for our session 4 for today, if you are looking at the syllabus here, it's not too bad. What we're worrying about today is layers and layer basics. And there's a lot of cool different ways that we can go about them. Some of these are pretty straightforward, where it's literally just something that you get used to by doing more projects. Others are a bit more advanced, and you might not be using them as much. But I believe that layers are pretty straightforward, so this shouldn't be too bad. Before we start up with our lecture, if you'd like to do this now, I uploaded a new session 4 participation. You can read it right now if you'd like, but inside of this lecture, I'll be going over how to do this for today's session. And what you will be doing is you're working with a few layers, and you can rearrange them and edit the opacity of them and have some new effects on them. But what you'll be doing is submitting a completed PSD to my email, and then I could go ahead and count that for your participation. So this is updated right now onto Moodle, so you can read that, but I'll be doing this inside of the lecture today, so you could follow along with those steps as well. So again, if you take a look at the syllabus for 125, we see here that we have a few layer basics that we need to get through, and there's a neat little photopea description of what the layers do in the folders, and there's some tools that we can work with as well with them. You can also see that there's a YouTube video here. This YouTube video is pretty handy. I would say you can watch it in your own time. It's not required or anything, but it does help quite a bit. Oh, I forgot about people in the waiting room again. Awesome. Welcome. Great. So they're not waiting. All right. So again, this YouTube video that's here, not required to be watched to help out with this, but it is useful to reiterate your understanding of it. Awesome. Also, excuse me, I have a little bit of a cold, I believe. I hope it's just a cold, so I'm sorry if I sniffle or cough. I'll try to minimize that. So hopefully nothing more serious than that. Awesome. Hi, Anda. Welcome. Great. So if we take a look at our session 4 inside of our Moodle page here, we can go into content and then folder for new files. And then underneath session 4, there's a bunch of images here. So for your participation for today and for just practice as well, you can use these images if you'd like. You're more than welcome to use any other type of image though. It doesn't just have to be these three. What I'm going to do really quick is download these three, and I believe I already have them down here. What I'll do really quick is just delete them, and then I'm just going to click each one. I downloaded them. I'm just going to drag them onto my desktop here. Now, once I have those opened, let me close my photopea. Let me open up photopea again, open from my computer, and then if I wanted to select, if you see here, I can click on nature and I can hit open to open up a new tab. What you can do to select many is if you drag, you can select multiple items. So I'm going to select my 3 items, or you can shift click. So you hold down the shift key on your keyboard, and when you click, you're able to select multiple things. So that's not really a Photoshop tool. That's just a regular Windows tool, but it's helpful to have those shortcuts as well. For now, I'm just going to select these ones, hit open. And now you'll notice that I have a bit of a problem. So I opened up these 3 images, but they seem to be in all different types of tabs here. So now here's where layers can get a bit confusing, is how you can work with them and rearrange them and whatnot. There's a few ways that you can go about putting these images into the nature image. I'm going to use the nature as my background and then have a few animals in there. What I can do is I can right click on the, let's see here. I can click on the layer that's here. See if I can copy it real quick. Control C. See if this one works. Oh, so that copies everything there. That might not work just yet. Sometimes you're able to copy it if you'd like, but another way you can do this is, if you remember, my nature scene is my main image that I'm going to be working with. So I can simply select this background that's here, and I can drag it into the nature scene. And it might be a bit hard to see, but if you notice that my nature.psd is gray, if I hover over it, it gets a bit blue. You'll notice at the bottom there, it's kind of blue. Once I release it, you'll see that I now have a new layer called background again inside of my nature scene. So now I have a cute little rabbit inside of my forest. I'm just going to rename this one rabbit for the purpose of this so that everyone understands it. And then for the background, I'm just going to call it forest. Again, the naming conventions do not matter for these. It's for yourself. So whichever one you feel comfortable using, use that. But for our purpose here, we're just going to call them rabbit and forest. Now I'm going to bring this wolf over here as well. So I'm going to drag inside of the wolf PSD, this image of the wolf into my nature PSD. And again, it's highlighted in blue. So I'm going to release. And now we have our 3 layers that are present, and we can rearrange these as we like. Excuse me. So if you remember from earlier lectures, I talked about how layers are similar to a stack of pancakes, and this rings true here. So if you notice here, the rabbit is above the wolf, and the wolf is above the forest scene. If I hide the wolf, the rabbit will be above the forest. And if I unhide it, it'll be back to normal. If I go ahead and I hold left click on one of these layers, if you notice how it's highlighted in black while the other ones aren't highlighted, I could drag them up. And if you'll see here, it kind of gives me an idea of where it's going to go. And if I release it up there, you'll notice that my rabbit and my, let me call this one wolf, are still inside of my layers pane, but they're not visible. Now, technically, they are visible, but not just to our eyes, because they're hidden behind the forest. So if I hide the forest, we'll see now that I have the rabbit and wolf inside of my scene. So again, that's just rearranging your layers here. I could put the forest in between them. Let me say right here. And now you'll notice that the rabbit is shown, but not the wolf. And I can drag the wolf to be above the forest. And now the wolf is in front of the forest in the layer pane. And also, it's in front of it inside of the image itself. Now, there's a few things here that we can look at. And you'll notice here, when you have a layer highlighted, you'll see in this layers pane that's right here, there's a few options you can work with. You can lock the layer. If you see here, this big lock change. And that means that I won't be able to move the layer and that it's stuck in place. So this might be helpful if I'm working with a lot of different layers and I want to make sure that one layer stays the same. I can essentially say I really like how this wolf looks, but I don't want to accidentally see here, move him around by accident. I like where he is. So what I can do is I can select the wolf, I can hit lock, and now I can, even if I accidentally hit his layer, he won't be able to be selected. Now if you notice why this might happen is my forest is selected here and I'm moving it around. But if I accidentally select the rabbit, you'll see here that I can move the rabbit around as well. Even if you look at my layers pane, the forest is highlighted. So sometimes it's beneficial to lock and unlock as you go on so that you don't accidentally mess up or move around layers that aren't supposed to be moved. Excuse me. Now you'll notice that there's a few more options up here. A main one here is the opacity, and some of you might be more familiar than others with this. What the opacity is a way for us to pretty much show how much or how little is visible of the wolf. So you can kind of make it almost like a movie scene or something where the wolf is inside of the forest almost. But if you see her at 100%, it will pretty much block everything as it's fully opaque. If I reduce it, you'll see that sometimes it's a bit more easier to see, but eventually at 0, he's pretty much transparent. Excuse me. In your projects, you'll see that you'll be told what the opacity should be. But as you can see here, you can fiddle around with it if you'd like. I might make him maybe 60%. Seems pretty good. Now you'll notice as well that the opacity is an option to do it. There's also the fill option. And the fill is another way that you can kind of hide or show items as well. We don't use fill as often as we use opacity, but you can kind of think of them as similar in these situations. And if you see here, there's a few more options that you can fiddle around with, but most of the time you'll just be using the lock option and the opacity option for most of these layers. You can either type a number that you'd like, so I can hit 60, go from there, or you can use this slider. There's another option here, if you see where it says normal, and this is your blending mode. So if you look at the syllabus, there's changing blending mode, and blending essentially means it's a fancy way of saying how the layers interact with each other, or how the layer is blended or created. It's much easier to show it than explain it here. So if you see here, if I take my wolf image and I select this normal drop down menu inside of it, I have a whole bunch of options here to blend and mess around with. If I go to dissolve, doesn't seem like much has changed. But if you see here, if I hit darken, you'll see that my entire layer has darkened and it looks a bit different. So this might be pretty handy. What if I leave it at darken and then I reduce my opacity? You can see that I can kind of get this cool eyes effect where it's just kind of like the very minimal wolf coming through. And with the rabbit, I could try something similar where I can make it so that he's visible as well. I can go to multiply, and that changes it as well. There's color burning, which is a really cool way to kind of make it very different looking based on what you'd like. Linear burn, all of these are very different, but if in general what these are blending modes. So you can do overlay, you can softly light it, you can hard light it as well. So what you can do is you can change the blending mode, and then you can also change the opacity and the fill as well. There's a lot of different ways you can work around it, but in general these are very cool and useful tools for ourselves here. Awesome. So now again, we did some dragging around, and again with each layer, as you click on them, you can change around the blending mode as you'd like. It doesn't matter if it's on top of the other ones. For instance, I can change the blending mode of the forest. It doesn't matter if it's colored by two other ones here. Doesn't seem to be doing too much behind there. Let me hide these. Sometimes the blending modes aren't as good as the other ones. Some of them come true a lot more often than the other ones too. But for now, this seems to be okay. Wondering why this guy isn't changing too often. I might have just have sometimes you might find an image where the blending modes don't have an obvious effect, but they do have effects on it, regardless if they're super obvious or not. As you can see here with the wolf one, the blending effect of darken makes a big more of an effect than the blending mode of darken on this one. Wondering, I can't really see a change anyway. It should be working just fine though. Excuse me. Now, let's see here. Let me change everything back to normal with our blending styles. And we can also, so if you notice here that sometimes I'm trying to move around my layer, and this layer might just be a bit too big for me to work with. And you'll also notice that I have these backgrounds here that are blocking my nature scene from going around. How about we take these issues one at a time? Why don't we go into how we can edit the size and the position of these images? If I wanted to say, let's make this rabbit a bit bigger, I can select my rabbit layer, make sure that the background is highlighted in gray. I can go to edit, and then in edit, I can go all the ways down to this option called free transform. The hotkey to do this is Alt, Control, and T. If you click all three of those at the same time, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Usually I just go for the option to go to edit and free transform. And you'll notice if you use the hotkey or the option in the edit free transform, you get a bunch of lines around your layer. And if you go to the corner, you're able to kind of flip the rabbit around. Maybe I can make them sitting like this. And I can increase and decrease the size of the rabbit as I see fit. As you see here, as I go to the corners, I can increase or decrease it there as well. And I can also make him longer like so, or shorter as well. And then the center, I can just put the center point of it. But usually I leave the center point at the center. If you see here, it kind of tells you where it's going to rotate it from. So let me redo a bit of this. I'm going to select my rabbit. I'm going to go into edit free transform. Excuse me. And now if you notice, again, I have all these options I can go around with. And the thing I did in the center here, the center point is important for layers. If you notice when I rotate my layer, it does it right in the center of the image so that I can rotate it perfectly in the center. Let's just say that I wanted to rotate the image for whatever reason by the corner edge. I can move this square that's in the center around as I feel. I can click on this square and then hold. And I can drag it to the corner that's over here. And then if I drag this image down, you'll notice that it actually uses that square as a hinge. So now it's going to be free transformed around that hinge rather than the center. If I want to drag this back to the center, you'll notice that it actually snaps into the center. So if you see here, I'm moving, and then eventually my square just goes right into the center, and I can release it, and then I'm back to normal with my center image. That's messing around with your layer points and resizing them, and that's allowing you to move around with the center point as you feel fit. Excuse me. Now there's a few more things that we can look at here for inside of our layer tab here. And we did quite a bit of it here. We rearranged, we changed the opacity. And the last thing I want to show off before I let you guys loose here is that if you go to layer, there's this option called layer style. And layer style is a cool thing that you can use to kind of make really interesting artwork, or maybe add in a new option for yourself as well. Let me go into layer style and then into blending options. And now I have the 4 selected. So let me redo this one more time. Why don't we use the wolf here, because the wolf seems to be the front and center. I'm going to select the wolf in my layer. I'm going to go to layer style, and then I'm going to hit blending options. Now, right away with your layer styling, this is an enhanced version of what is given to you at the top over here. So just like normal, I have my opacity, I have my fill if I like it, and I have my blending mode. Now we already know what these do, we went over them earlier. This is the exact same as what we have here. But you'll notice that there's a few more options here. There's something called color overlay, where you can define a color that will go over the overall image. I can make that color a bit lighter, but you'll notice that the wolf is now gone because it's covered by the red. I can give a few more here. I can give a type of glow to it. I can give it an inner glow. Oops, daisy, I'm clicking too many at once. If you notice, it's a little hard to see, but if you see here at the bottom left, you see how in my layer, I kind of have this white line that's showing that's not there when I have it. I have an inner shadow I can give to my wolf as well, like so. I have this stroke texture I can give it, and there's a bunch of options I can work around with. Now, some of these are much more complex than others, but if you notice here, if I select bevel and emboss, and then I go down to texture, and I select texture, I can actually add a pattern to my image here. So right now I have this flower pattern, but there's a bunch I can add in. Maybe I can add in this one here. And you'll notice that one's a bit harder to see, but if you look at the wolf's background, I kind of have these squares here. Maybe I could select that one. That one's obvious to see. And then I can increase the scale of these as I'd like. I can increase the depth that they go at as well. You can make how obvious they are, so that might be good if you're making a kind of like a gymnasium or anything too. So there's a lot of different things you can work with as well. Usually for these though, they're not supposed to be the front and center, and the patterns are usually supposed to be a bit more muted, I would say. But I say mess around with these if you'd like to add into patterns. And maybe you could add into contour as well. A very cool one I want to show off is something down here called the gradient overlay. Now if I select gradient overlay, you'll notice that my wolf becomes pretty much completely covered with this black and white. But if I select the opacity and I reduce it, you'll notice that I can see the wolf that's behind there as well. So let me make the wolf a bit more visible. And now if you see here inside a gradient, I can select this option, and I can actually kind of mess around with these colors too. I can change the type of color it is if I select one of the black squares at the bottom. Not sure why it's not letting me select it, and I hit the color. I can now change the type of color that I'd like. So maybe I like the blue color. And then I don't like how the white looks on it, so I'm going to select white. Maybe I'll make it a bit more gray. I can hit OK there. And now I have this cool little pattern that's on my layer that was, oh, I didn't save it, sorry. But if you saw it there, I was able to get the layer work. Let me see here one more time. We go to gradient overlay. And then after I have fixed up with this overlay, and if you'll see here as well, there's an angle. And this angle essentially means how the gradient is working. So for right now, it's going from bottom up, blue to gray. I can change this to go from side to side or top down. Or maybe from the edge over here, I could put the blue to be down there and then make it go to gray like this. There's a lot of cool things I could do with this as well. So now I have my layer done, and I clicked OK to save the effects. And if you notice here, I have something that says EFF on the side. And if I click on the arrow that's by that EFF, you'll see that I have these options where it says effects and gradient overlay. So let's just say that I really like how this looks, but I want to see how it look normally. I can actually hit the eyeball on gradient overlay, and it will hide the effects that I added to my wolf. And again, this is within your layer styles, but anytime that you're adding a layer style, you will get this option for effects, and you will be able to display and show the effects as you like. You could have multiple effects on the one layer as well. It's up to you how far or how much you want to add to it. But this is very helpful to get used to, as a few of the projects are going to be involved with using some of these effects. Now, if you like how the effects look here, you can possibly duplicate the layer if you'd like. And if you see here, I get the EFF again. And let's just say I like how that looks on a wolf, so I want to give it to the rabbit. I'm going to hold down on the effects over here, and just like I did with my layers, I can drag up to the rabbits, and I can release on the rabbits, and now the rabbit has the same effect as well, and I can simply delete the effect that was on the wolf. Oh, deleted both of them. Let me bring that effect down to the original. Could delete that one, and now I still have this effect that was on my wolf onto my rabbit now as well. Awesome. So this is essentially the majority of layer styles and what you'll be working with for the foreseeable future. I did add in session 4 participation here. And so essentially what I want everyone to do for today's participation is to do what I just did there. I did a very simple example here, but maybe try to add in some effects, add in some different gradient overlays just to get familiar with using these tools. So you don't have to go crazy. It doesn't need to be amazing, but you guys always impress me with the more advanced work that you guys do. So if you do enjoy doing that, be my guest. But what I want you to work with is 2 or more images, and it has to be 2 or more because we're working with layers and arranging them. So maybe grab 2 or more images. You can use the tree images that I provided inside of session 4. Feel free to use ones that you'd like as well. After you messed around with using these and fixed up your image, you can go to File and just save as a PSD. And then you can go ahead and send over that PSD to my email, and that will just be the participation there. Now, again, I said earlier, if you want to get very fancy, what we could do here, and again, I don't want to push too much at once on you guys because this is a lot of new stuff. But if you remember from our previous session, we used a lot of tools with selection and using some tools. So very quickly, again, this isn't required for the participation. All I want to see is that everyone knows how to work with more than one layer and how you can add the effects. But if you want to get very fancy with this, you can go into the object selection tool, and then you can grab the magic wand. Now, some of you might know where I'm going with this as well, but you can actually select on these layers the background of these objects here. And I'm going to hit delete here. I'm going to hit delete around the rabbit a little bit. It might take a while for me to get everything. Let me see if I can work on the wolf as well. The wolf might be a bit tougher to do. But essentially what you could do is use the magic wand to cut out the background of these 2 animals and then go from there as well. Again, you don't need to do that just yet, but that is something that you could potentially do if you wanted to figure out how you can use some of these tools as well. For instance, I can use object selection. That doesn't seem to work too well. On the rabbit. Doesn't seem to be grabbing all of them though. And as you can see, I could try to fiddle around a bit and get the background out, but sometimes the backgrounds are a bit too mixed together. But that's fine for right now. So again, for your session 4 participation, please do what I did during this lecture and essentially just send it over to me. You can either use the exact same type of effects or anything, or you can mix it up with yourself, but try to get that over to me by the end of today's session.